Well, Year 4, welcome to the next chapter of Secrets of a Sunken. We are now up to chapter 3. This is rather exciting. Part 3, not chapter 3. So, the shadows move, but the dark is never completely dispersed. Howard Carter, archaeologist. Now, I'm going to set you a little challenge. Who would like to research who is Howard Carter? What is he all about? What is he famous for? I would then like you to do a little comment on this blog post to tell me what you know about him. Oh, maybe at some point you will be learning about the ancient Egyptians, and that would be very interesting. You'll know so much more before you even start. Right, without further ado, let's start our story. Chapter 8. That night in bed, my brain kept whizzing. You did it, Lil, I told myself. You found the translation. But it wasn't the end of the story, was it? There was no mention of how Kiki died, or his funeral, or the burial, which made me think there was still more to this account, even now. Then there was the curse. Kiki's injuries from the chariot accident were too similar to those of the Washington Post reporter who had crashed his car. Head injuries, fractured legs. It was no coincidence. Anyone with a special interest in the Tutankhamun story seemed to be at risk from the curse. And that included us. I lay there, my heart booming, thinking this over. At least the translation did give us a better idea of where Kiki's tomb might be. The accounts of Mr. Carter's dig said his search was on the valley floor, yet Myers' chosen place was high up in the rock face. It suggested 2 tombs, then not one. It was bizarre to think Mr. Carter himself didn't know this. But then didn't Professor say that Mr. Carter had dismissed the jars as insignificant all those years ago? He'd be kicking himself now, yet as far as the newspapers were concerned, he was already a national hero, which made me remember something Grandad said. They called King Louis V of France, could be fifth, I don't know my Roman numerals, guys, the Sun King, because of how important he thought he was. His mission in life to dazzle everyone. Yet, don't forget, Lily, underneath those wigs and gold brocade, he was just a man with flat feet and bad breath. That Howard Carter is like a Sun King. Everyone thinks he's a go-getting explorer, but he's a sly one, mark my words. He's got secrets by the bagful. I wondered how Mr. Carter managed to keep his secrets to himself. All weekend I tried my very best to keep our plan secret, but by Sunday it was getting exhausting. What's wrong with that last spud, Lil? Dad asked as we ate our roast lunch. Nothing, I shoved it in my mouth quick before he could pinch it. I mean, it was a very decent lunch. We had lamb, potatoes done in lard, carrots, tinned peas, and gravy thick as treacle. I was good at roast, but this one was especially nice, almost as if we were celebrating something. Even I, with my head full of Egypt, couldn't fail to notice. When lunch was finished, I went back down to swill our dishes under the tap in the backyard. And when I came upstairs again, Mum and Dad were discussing me. Since the kitchen door was ajar, I hovered there to listen. She could come with us, Reg, Mum was saying. It might be nice to do it as a family this year. What about her schoolwork? Replied Dad. St Kilda's won't tolerate her falling behind. I wonder sometimes if she realises just how lucky she is. I groaned. St Kilda's again. The work I had to do, the gratitude I was expected to show. Dad never seemed to talk about anything else except, then he said, we agreed never to tell her, remember? But she's older now, Mum pointed out. I was all ears. What were they on about? It didn't sound like St Kilda's anymore. The kitchen door opened fully. Dad came out, saw me for a second and looked almost lost. There you are, he said, forcing a smile. His hands were shaking badly. Seeing as I'd noticed, he'd quickly stuffed them in his pockets. Dishes are done, I muttered. Good girl, your mother and I are popping out for a stroll, all right? It's best that you stay here and get your prep done. The seconds my parents left, I slumped face down amongst my school books. I couldn't concentrate. I was now anxious about where they'd gone. They never went out together. Dad went to the pub on a Friday evening, and once a month Mum played cribbage with her work pals from Woolworths. That was it. The only thing I could think was that they'd gone to visit Grandad, though it seemed unlikely. Grandad and Dad couldn't bear to be in the same room as each other. That made me worry even more. If they had gone to the hospital, then it must be for the very worst reason. Grandad was dying, and Dad had gone to settle their differences. On the brink of tears, I got up and put on my coat. If Grandad was ill, then I had to see him too. He must know I was trying my very hardest to get the jar back to Egypt with my friend's help. If he could just hang on for a few more days, he'd see. Though now I'd say all this with Mum and Dad at the bedside, I'd no idea. In the street, I soon spotted my parents. I was about to run to catch them up when I realised they'd passed the bus stop. They weren't going to the hospital after all. What a relief I felt quickly turned into confusion, because they were certainly going somewhere. Swithin Street itself was busy with kids out on their bikes or playing hopscotch on the pavement. After weeks of cold weather, it was a bright, warm day. There were people chatting on doorsteps as a couple of cats stretched out on a wall in the sunshine. It was, all told, a nice afternoon for a stroll, yet my parents weren't strolling. Dad was going so fast, Mum kept having to break into a run to stay up with him, and so did I as I followed behind. Just then I could feel a stitch coming on. Dad turned down St Mary's Lane, a little road that ran behind the cutlery factory, before it stopped at a dead end at the churchyard and a convent. We never went to church as a family. Once, when I'd asked why not, Dad replied, "Oh, no God would have let us happen." Today, though, my parents were heading for St Mary's. They had to be. There was nothing else down there. It was a funny little place, jammed in by the factory wall on one side and the convent on the other. It had to be the greenest, most overgrown graveyard you had ever saw. Long ago, during the Black Death, it had been a plague pit. Nowadays, it was where you'd see couples on their break from the factory having a quick smoke or a kiss. As far as I knew, neither of these was reason for my parents to go there. Nor was the obvious one. All the dead people in our family were buried in the big cemetery near the heath. By the time I reached St Mary's, they were already in the churchyard. Dad had slowed down and was reaching out to take Mum's hand, making me realise they wanted to be alone. So I hid behind the gate post.